Hi, I'm here. So, again, good morning, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining with us today. So, today, I think it will be our third advisor, Sean, to talk about some lesson planning details or techniques with us. So, let's give Sean a big applause.
Thank you, Kenny. Um, so, guys, I want to say thank you for your presence and your participation this week. I know it's been a lot, and today is the last workshop of the week. So I don't want it to go too long and too intensive, but I do want to spend time talking about lesson planning because I think I was told by at least one of the coordinators that it's a topic that a lot of the ETAs would like more help with. So I'm glad I was tasked with this presentation. A few things to bring up at the top. You probably saw an email reply this morning. It was my morning here in California from an ETA that was pretty stressed out, I would say, to say the least. Um, I think most of you probably saw that. Um, what I can say is, I think we're all kind of in the same boat. At least those of us that are still in the U.S., right? Celine and I, and a lot of ETAs. It is stressful, but at the same time, we're all going through this, and the TICO offices that we are applying through are aware of what's going on. And thanks to people like Kevi and a lot of other people working behind the scenes, they probably don't get enough credit, but they get they get a lot of complaints. Um, you know, I really appreciate the effort they're putting in, and if I recall the email correctly, the ETA was stressed out because I think she was worried she would have to get some tests redone. Um, Hopefully that's not the case. I think if most people can go back to the same provider, they can have a new form filled out as long as the tests are not older than 6 months. So for everybody, I think that should be okay. And yeah, I think Kevi might have a little more insight, but I think she mentioned something like 4 weeks turnaround time, and I think that's pretty doubtful. Um, I know the TICO offices are in the US are aware of this, and I can't imagine that they're terribly busy with extra paperwork right now because the borders have been closed for quite a while. So it's very few people that have been able to get in and out. It'll depend on your local TICO office as well. I know Celine has been telling me what it's like with the LA branch. I'm working with the San Francisco branch, and they gave me a 3 to 4 business day processing time, which sounded great to me. So I think once they get it, they're going to start working on it. And in the past, when they would do it, when you would come in, I think they could get it done in a week at most, a matter of a few business days. So um, I don't think it's going to take a month. I know it seems really fast that they're expecting us to be there. And as badly as I want to be in Taiwan, I didn't choose the first date as a possibility. So I'm hoping to be there by, I think, the 22nd. Yeah, but if you're involved in international programs, if you study abroad, if you work abroad, you'll get used to this. It's something that you're going to have to do, and yeah, I guess it gets easier. I think I'm less stressed than I used to get, but it does feel a little uncomfortable. But it's also good that we're in the U.S. Things tend to happen pretty fast. There's a lot of good accountability, and in some other countries, when you have to get paperwork done, they don't have an answer for you when you ask them how long it's going to take, and it can really take a long time. So uh, I think it's good to still be optimistic, and I think doctors and notaries and the TICO offices are working as hard as they can with us to expedite the process. And yeah, I went back and got my x-rays done today, and I already got the results, so I consider that a good sign that things are turning around. I'm waiting for my flight to be booked too, and then I can send off my documents. So let's keep our fingers crossed. And if anything, I'm really grateful that we have these workshops to distract us a little bit and focus on the things that we like and the things that we're going to be doing for about 10 more months. So I just wanted to mention that briefly because I assume other people are a little bit stressed, and I think we can hope for the best. I don't see any reason to think it's going to take a month or more. Can't imagine. Okay. So we got that out of the way. Again, thanks for joining us. We've had good crowd. We have good size, over 40 people for every workshop. I think Celine had tons of people because she had LETs and ETFs and some other folks. So it's great to have everybody here. And it's really good to be able to connect your name to some faces, because we've had some homework coming through, and it's good to be, okay, that's that person, that's that person. So we can kind of match you up with your personality, and that'll hold us over until we meet up face to face, which hopefully is in October. All right, so hopefully this works out okay. I'm sharing part of my screen. I'm sharing a tab actually, and also watching the presentation. So hopefully I don't, hopefully I can synchronize everything. But I think it's really interesting that a lot of us are still in the US. And in addition to knowing your name and your face, it's good to know where you are, where you're coming from. So when we meet, we'll be like, oh, okay, this is the person from Philly. I've been there, and we can have something to talk about. So in my case, I'm in the Bay Area. The photo I put on the slide is actually San Francisco. Very few people live there anymore because it's so expensive. And it's unfortunate because it's a really beautiful city. It was always kind of like raw and tough when I was a kid, like going there in the 90s. And now it's just like a lot of tech people hanging out. So it's changed a bit. But I grew up around here, haven't lived here for a long time, but I'm back waiting out the situation. And I will be based in Kaohsiung City. Never been there, never been to Taiwan, but I've lived in East Asia a few times, in Korea, and I've been to Japan and Southeast Asia. So I'm looking forward to being in the south of Taiwan and getting to check out the country. So I don't think we really know where most of you are coming from. So it'd be interesting if a few people want to share. For example, Tyler, do you want to let us know where you are and where you're going to be? What part of the south in Taiwan?
Yeah, sure. Happy to kind of give a brief intro to myself. So as you know, my name's Tyler. I'm currently based in Las Vegas, Nevada. So funny you mentioned the San Francisco TICO office, because that's who I'm going to be working with to submit my forms. And I will also be based in Kaohsiung as well.
Do you know if you're in Kaohsiung City or just the province somewhere?
The city.
Cool. We'll be neighbors to a certain degree. Do you have any more intel on, did they give you any extra info that I haven't shared?
As it relates to San Francisco,
No, I mean the TICO office.
Oh, yeah, not that I think you kind of covered all the bases. I unfortunately actually have to redo my the whole health form thing. So actually today I kind of got that process started. But yeah, they also kind of gave me like that about a week processing time once they receive it. So kind of lines up with what you said earlier.
Sounds good. This sounds good that they're being consistent. Great. Yeah. Thanks, Tyler. My sister lives in Reno, which is not near Las Vegas, but is in Nevada, right?
Yeah, sorry, we don't really talk about Reno, but that's something we can do offline for sure.
That's fine. I'm fine with people shading Reno. It's not my favorite little city. What's their slogan? The biggest little city on earth or something?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it's not really memorable, but we won't throw too much shade at Reno because there's a lot of people from California moving there, escaping to there. Great, thank you. Max, where are you and where are you going to be?
I'm in a town called Wheaton right now. It's outside of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of so I was talking to the Tico office. I was asking them about close this window, it's so loud. I was talking to the Tico office about my health form. I got mine like 3 months ago from September 11th. And they said I thought it was like a 3-month expiration date, but they said it's fine, which is weird. So
Yeah, so I mean that I guess you basically have it's 3 months for them to start processing it, right? So you have what, 10 days to get it there? Is that right?
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I think if it's like a day before or after, they're probably flexible. But yeah, just make sure you like 1 or 2 day it to them, get it there as soon as possible.
Yeah, they seem pretty chill with the whole situation for me and like understanding, which is nice.
Yeah, and it's like slightly, it's not subjective, but each Tico office has a little bit different procedure. So me and Celine were comparing. Oh, is that what they said? They want that document by like that way, and I'm like, oh, you sure? And so I think it's pretty flexible. I don't think they're gonna be like, hey, I don't like your smile in this passport photo. So I think it's gonna be okay. Cool. Where are you gonna be in the southern region?
Oh yeah, I'll be in Kinmen.
Okay,
hmm
the little island near
Yes.
China. Is that can a Taiwanese person can a Taiwanese person clarify the pronunciation? I've heard different pronunciations of
I was actually wondering that as well.
like Chinmen, or is it actually like a hard T?
Jingmen.
Okay.
Jingmen.
Okay.
Kinmen.
Yeah.
So Jingmen is in Mandarin, but if you translate to English, we will call it Kinmen. Yeah, so both way we can understand. Either Kinmen or Jingmen. Both are okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing about trying to write some languages in English is sometimes you can't. I think we have this idea that like, oh, you can write anything in your language, but then you hear like Mandarin or Thai or Vietnamese, and you're like, I have no idea how to write this in English. So you just we have to memorize, I guess. Jingmen, something like that. We have time, right? We have time to work on that. Okay. Great. Sounds good. Wheaton. Sounds slightly familiar. Okay. How about you, Evan? Where are you?
I'm in a little town called Stowe outside of Boston. I scheduled my appointment with the TICO office in Boston on the exact day that my medical form expires. So I need to make really sure I get everything there in the right order on that day, because that's what it's going to have to be, unless I want to redo it. But that's my only story with that.
Cool. Where are you going to be based?
Oh, Pington, all the way in the south.
Yeah. Okay. Are you also in the city or just somewhere in that region?
In like the southernmost part of Pington.
Okay. Well, you don't have to rub it in. I think that's where all the nice beaches are, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure all the really nice beach areas are down there.
Yeah, I do.
On the
I do.
tip.
That's true.
So yeah, we'll be visiting you a lot for sure. Okay. Good. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the health forms, I think they're valid for 6 months. So even if your health certificate itself is expired because it's been 3 months, you can still use the same health documents. They just have to fill out another form if it comes to that. Cool. Okay. Hey Emily, where are you?
Hello, I am in Apple Valley, Minnesota, which is like 25 minutes south of Minneapolis. And I will be in Kinmen with Max for this upcoming school year. So I'm super excited. And the visa process for me has definitely been like up and down, I think, for everyone else too. I just mailed in my documents because I'm applying to the Chicago office. So I just got all my documents mailed in today. So fingers crossed that it all looks good. I like scanned my documents beforehand. And there was like issues with my health exam because I got it done back in school in Maine. And so I had to like I got my provider back there to like refill out the form and got it like authenticated with them, and then turned out like I couldn't use a main document. So I had to like redo it with my physician here, which was kind of a pain, but got it in. So hopefully it's all good now.
Why didn't they like the main document? Is it a different
They
region?
said since it's like out of their jurisdiction, they just like can't process it.
So maybe you were closer to like the New York office and it has to be.
Yeah,
sent
they
to
said
them.
well, at first they like replied back to my documents and said, it looks like you're a Maine resident because of your health certificate. So apply to Boston. I was like, I'm not. I live in Minnesota. So yeah, I had to get that all fixed. But
Wow, I didn't think that'd be that specific, but good thing you were able to fix it in time.
yeah, but I would recommend like if people are mailing it in, if their offices are like replying back to their emails quickly, if you can just scan your documents, because then they were also able to like check everything else and make sure that was all correct before I actually mailed it in. So they said like it was all ready to go.
So you're saying scan our documents ourselves, keep them on our phone or on our computer, just as like a backup.
Yeah, and you can like email it to them just so like they can, because they reviewed all my documents, and like I didn't have my COVID statement because I didn't really know where to get that, and they like said make sure you have a COVID statement saying that you don't have a fever or anything. So they were really good at like making sure that I had everything I needed, so that when I did put it like in the mail, it was all ready to go.
Wow, I haven't heard of the COVID statement. I should probably reach out to the TICO office and make sure.
I think some are requiring it, some don't.
Some
Yeah,
are.
like you said, it's very dependent on the specific TICO office.
And the office you're dealing with is obviously very precise because they're telling you to send digital copies as well.
No, they didn't tell me. I just wanted to like do it just for my own sake. So like they didn't receive my stuff in the mail, and then there was like something wrong with it since we were on such a short like time frame. I just wanted to make sure that it was all correct. So when they like got it finally in the mail, there wasn't an issue with it.
Interesting. That's a good tip, everybody. Yeah, take pictures or scan your documents before you send them, just in case. Cool. You're gonna be in Jingmen as well, you said. Okay, cool, great. Let's do one more before we get started. Peony, where are you right now?
Hi, yes. I am based in New York, so very exciting. And I'm also going to be in Kinmen with Max and Emily. So I think you got a bunch of us in a row here. But actually, I'm really happy because I submitted all my visa stuff today. And I was so happy that I went across the street from the office, the TICO office, and I bought cake right after I submitted it. So that will be my treat because I've been so stressed working on the application for, I think, the past like week or something. Just a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. So best of luck to everyone if you're submitting.
Yeah, treat yourself to a cake when you're
Yeah.
You deserve it. Cool. Yeah, I think Kinmen is the biggest region for ETA. There's the most ETAs are in Kinmen, right? Is that right,
Taipei
Fonda?
a lot too, but in our region,
Oh, but I mean in our region. Sorry, yeah. So yeah, surprisingly, there's more people out on that island than in Kaohsiung. But you know, hey, island life. Cool. I lived in New York City for 7 years, so miss it a lot, but also a stressful place to live. Cool. So it's good to know where some of you guys are coming from. I'm sure we'll have a lot more time over the course of the year to get to know each other, in addition to working together professionally. But again, yeah, let's take a step back. I'd like to wish you guys congrats on not only being offered the position as an ETA, but also taking it. It's a huge step. Perhaps some of you have already lived abroad before, and some of you are studied abroad, and some of you haven't. But whether or not you stay in teaching or English language teaching, put your slides in presentation mode. The only problem with that is that I won't be able to see anybody, I think. Is that right, Kenny? If I do a full presentation mode, I won't be able to see anyone?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know it's a
Maybe
little
what you
bit
could
small.
do is you see the little up arrow under the share button. I think if you click that, it'll minimize the top. And then if you minimize the speaker notes at the bottom, maybe it'll just like drag out and make the whole screen bigger. Do you see what I mean? There are like little buttons you can click around.
Yeah, Sean, that's how I did it last time. So
Sure.
where do you see where it says present? There's a little arrow pointing, like a little triangle pointing down.
Down.
Oh, sorry. I was at
Right next to present. Not use on the top right corner. You see share and present.
So at the bottom tab, I have like the presenting mode, but there's nothing really at the top. I can stop presenting on the right corner at the top.
No, not this is your screen right now, right? What it looks like.
No, so my screen is actually on the presentation. I'm not looking at my slide. Should I go to my slide?
Oh, okay. Yeah, go to your slide.
Okay.
There
Oh,
you
okay.
go. All right. See, see what present next to present.
Okay.
There's
Okay.
a tiny, tiny little triangle,
Sorry. Okay.
and click on presenter view.
Mm-hmm.
See if that works. That's how I was able to do it and still see faces. Yeah, no.
Should I be able to see people on the same screen, or am I going to have to change tabs?
You should be able to see people. I was able to.
I have a very small like view of. There's a timer going now, and I can see like a thumbnail of the screen, and then behind it is a really big version of my presentation.
There should be, right, the timer, you can like minimize that.
Okay, I
or
think it's
put
bigger
it off to
now,
the
right?
side.
Is it bigger now for you guys?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. It's bigger for me too. It was at the issue, is it Georgia or Georgina? Was it too small?
It's Georgia. Yeah, that's way better. Thank you.
Okay, good. I think you still can't see me in this photo, but all the other slides will be bigger. So yeah, again, really exciting time for you, actually for everybody, obviously. But I think if I think back to when I started teaching abroad, I was 22 and I didn't know I was going to keep doing it. And so you might be in that same boat too. You might still be figuring out what you like. If I really like teaching, is it worth it? Do I want to do something else? But it's always the skills you learn as a teacher are things that will help you pretty much with whichever career you go into, whether you stay in teaching or you do something else. But they're really good people skills and really good intangibles, soft skills, things that you can't really learn just from reading a book, things that you have to learn from experiencing. And the great thing about working in this kind of field is you're always with people. I don't think we're going to be replaced by robots, at least not anytime soon. So we're not in a field that's going to die out or disappear, or we're not going to have stories like, oh, when I was a kid and we used to have teachers and they're like, what's a teacher? Like that's not going to happen, right? So it's a very rewarding career, a lot of hard work, but I really can't think of anything that can be more rewarding. And especially in your position, you'll have a lot of ability to work with different kinds of people, with your colleagues, with people in the community, and you'll be able to learn a lot about Taiwanese people and about American people, people from other countries you'll encounter, and especially about yourself. So yeah, who knows if you'll stay in TESOL or in teaching, but even if things get frustrating, if sometimes you feel like you want to quit, you need a timeout, that's what teaching is like. But at the end of the day, it can be really rewarding, and you get to work with really cool people. And the more you travel, just, I feel like you just get better, more well-rounded, and you just have a lot of amazing experiences, and your life just becomes a lot richer. So again, congrats. And we're all really excited, and we're excited for you as well. We're about to dive right into it, but a phrase that has come up in my mind as we've been working together is intrinsic motivation. And we use this term a lot when teaching, especially children, because a lot of them they haven't really learned how to be motivated to learn for the rewards of learning in itself, right? So children are usually taught to be, externally motivated in terms of grades, in terms of something from their parents, a present, something like that. But if you teach different levels, and if you teach children and then you teach adults, which is really different and really eye-opening, you'll learn this kind of process that happens with not just with students, but with people as they get older, when they think about why they do things, and things being beneficial to them outside of a classroom, right? It makes you smarter, it makes you a better person, it makes you more sensitive. So what I'm saying is I think it's really great that most of you are here this week and participating in these workshops. We're here to help. That's what we do. We're basically just here to help you guys, to give ideas, to give insights if we can, to motivate you, to cheer you on. So I'd welcome you as you're teaching, and as you're dealing with students, and as you're going through this process, just to think about, what are the intrinsic rewards of teaching and of participating with us and with other people in the program. And a lot of this is for you to grow as a teacher and as a person. So yeah, that's all I wanted to mention about that. So let's get into it. I want to take a quick poll. I'm going to ask a few questions about lesson planning, and I'd like to know what you think by a thumbs up, thumbs down, or of course you could do like a thumb in the middle. So I know how to write an organized and effective lesson plan. What do you think? Okay. I saw mostly thumbs down. That's okay. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Lesson planning is, it's probably something that's under taught actually in a lot of educational programs, and something where the onus is really probably on the teacher a lot of the time. So I'm glad we're taking some time to talk about this as part of professional development. What about this one? I have a lesson plan of some sort for class every day. Don't be shy. If you don't have one every day, that's a high bar. Don't worry. Yeah, great. Yeah, so the longer you teach, it really depends. It depends, because you have some teachers that stay at the same school teaching the same level for their whole career. That's not me. I like to move around. I like to try different things. But there are career teachers that teach 5th grade for 35 years or more. And that kind of teacher, his or her lesson plans are in their DNA at that point. They have their books, they have their notes, and they have a kind of mental archive of everything they've ever taught. So for that kind of person, the lesson plans are pretty much ingrained. But for most teachers that teach different subjects, that try different schools, different contexts, even for really experienced teachers, it's rare, and Matt and Celine can jump in as well at some point in this conversation, but it's really rare for me not to write down some kind of notes on what I want to cover. And we'll get into the reasons for that, because even if you've taught something before, you want to make sure you're teaching, as something that really relates to the curriculum, or that fits in with a certain lesson plan. So it's always good to have something, whether it's really simple or a full page or to a lesson plan. Good. Experienced teachers don't need to spend much time on lesson plans. Celine, you're like kind of down, or you're like 25%? Okay, you're all the way down. Yeah, mostly down, right? So I kind of talked about this in the last comment, but it depends. But at the same time, even experienced teachers usually have little notes written at the top of their page of the book they're going into, or the printout they're bringing into class. just reminders. There's nothing weak about putting 3 Roman numerals at the top of your paper of things you want to make sure you talk about or go over in your lesson. That's how we remember things, you know. It's good to have little sticky notes here and there to remember, or just little notes jotted. So yeah, I would agree with most people there. I think there's one more. Nice lesson planning at work. Lesson planning isn't nearly as important as other activities like grading. Your favorite. Right, a lot of thumbs down. So yeah, another really good topic, maybe we can do this later this semester or next semester, is talking about how to approach grading, because teachers, and especially new teachers, probably spend a lot of time grading, and that's one of the least attractive parts of teaching for me, especially when it becomes super time consuming. So yeah, maybe someday we could have a workshop on like low stakes and high stakes assignments and activities, because yeah, some teachers will spend a lot of time grading anything. And sometimes it's okay to send back an assignment, especially a low stakes assignment with a check mark. So yeah, grading, super important. Lesson planning also very important. It's really hard to say one is more important than the other, because if you don't lesson plan well, the students don't know what they're going to be graded on. You won't know exactly how you're grading if you don't have a good rubric. So it's all interconnected. Is there one more? Okay, this is a little snarky. Nothing ever really goes to plan in my class anyway, so why make a lesson plan? Yeah, this one's a little bit of a downer. I think we all have lesson plans that don't really go our way, and that's really the hard thing as a teacher, because teachers tend to be pretty idealistic and have a little bit of perfectionist tendencies. And teaching is definitely not a perfect science or a perfect art. So one of the skills people learn is just how to deal with when something doesn't work, not taking it personally, not getting angry, not throwing out the baby with, how does that idiom work? I forget, but you know what I mean, right? So basically, things sometimes go wrong, but it's important to make lesson plans because they provide structure. We can put backup plans there when things don't really work. And yeah, without them, we're pretty lost, Last one, I promise, it's the last one. Student learning suffers in many ways when the teacher has avoided making lesson plans. Yeah, Emily, do you have something to say about that? Why do you have thumbs up for sure, 100%?
Well, I think just like not having any sort of idea of what you even, I guess, like a theme that you want to cover that day. And like maybe like a key point that you want to get across that day, like not even having some sort of like little thinking ahead about that could be really detrimental, because then you're just kind of going to waste time, not have a kind of like clear pathway for your students. It can just be like really all over the place, which especially learning a different language could be super confusing if you're kind of jumping all over the place. It's definitely good to, like we've talked about, have that adaptability, but knowing kind of like a theme or a larger picture, at least, of a key point or something you want your students to take away, I think is really important.
Yeah, that's great. I think we can all think back to a teacher or 2 or 3 or a professor that was kind of like the freestyling type of teacher, and like didn't comb their hair, and like, you know, had like ketchup on their shirt, and like clearly hadn't spent much time preparing their lesson. And I mean, in my case, most of the students didn't take them very seriously. They had, you know, everybody was kind of sad, but it was kind of laughing behind the teacher's back. So yeah, especially young learners need to know the expectations. If they don't know what you're doing that day, that week, that month, if it seems kind of aimless, then guess what? They're just going to be aimless too, right? So kids are like sponges and they will absorb what you give them. But if you don't give them any plan or any structure, that's tough. That's a tough one. Thank you, Emily. That was great. Let's move on, right? So a lesson plan of any sort, whether it's simple or complex, is like a blueprint, right? So it's not just a blueprint for you, but it's a blueprint for the students. It's basically showing that you understand how they learn, right? If you understand how they learn, you know how to set up the lesson plan, how to move things along, how much time to spend on everything, right? So I guess I'm gonna have to do this. I wish Kenny was sharing, because then he could help me. But we're only gonna do 1 or 2 breakout rooms today, but I want to start off with one to give you some time, because I would like you guys to make a list of about 5 or 6 things that you think should be in a lesson plan. They can be really basic or they can be a little bit more nuanced, but 5 or so really solid ideas of what you think should be in a lesson plan. So Kenny, are you able to help me with this, or do I have to make the breakout rooms myself?
I think Kevin can do the breakout room because Kevin will be the host of this meeting.
Oh.
But Kevin says wait for him for a bit.
For a bit. Okay. You know what then? Like 30 seconds or like 5 minutes, Kenny? You don't know. You don't know.
I don't know.
Okay. Okay, no big deal. Here we go, improvising. So that's okay. We'll do another activity in a breakout room. We can do this by ourselves. So I'm gonna get the timer started. Good. And we won't go into groups. We'll be by ourselves. But so I'd like you, if you have some paper around or you have a tab open on your computer, what comes to mind when you think of things that should be on a lesson plan? What are the 5 or 6 big things? Let's take, I don't know if we need a full 7 minutes, but maybe 5. Let's get going on that.
Hi, sorry, Sean. So how many rooms and how long do you need?
Are you gonna do it? Or
I think Kevin is on his way.
Oh, well, I think we can just do it individually this time.
Okay,
But
okay.
I think yeah, we already started. They're already working on it.
Cool.
Thank you though. Thank you.
Oh.
Okay, guys. So it seems like the majority of people are wrapping up. Good to know. I gave you a little bit too much time, but you also did it alone, which makes it faster, right? Great. So most people are done, and we've already heard from a few people. But before I share my ideas, I'd like a couple people to explain theirs. So Jamie, haven't heard from you today. I heard from you yesterday, I believe. But can you break down why you chose these five?
Uh, yeah, sure. So I chose learning objectives first, because you want to show what students like what you want to teach in that class that day, and then things you didn't get to last time. So if you didn't like get to a part in the lesson, or you think the students need improvement on there, that's a way you could add to your lesson plan. The pedagogy and how you're going to actually teach these lessons next, and then basically assessments, and how you're going to assess where the level of the students are at that moment in time.
Yeah, great. So some of those are really nuanced. Others are like bonus things I would definitely include in a lesson plan. I like her idea about things you did not get to last time, but things that you're going to remind them about. So maybe you're gonna have a warm up. So that's a really good way to approach lesson planning. A warm up might be something you write down at the top of your lesson plan, or it might, if you've taught it before, you might be like, oh, I know what I want to start with. I want to make sure they didn't forget our project on this or that thing. So yeah, definitely a warm up, or if there was something you didn't get to last time or you didn't spend enough time on, you can go over it again, make sure they comprehend. And yeah, pedagogy, a big word, big idea. And yeah, assessments, definitely great. Okay, let's do maybe one or two more. Karenina, is that the correct way to pronounce it? Karenina.
Yeah, hi. I was also thinking along the same lines of Jamie, with the learning objectives, or an outline at the beginning. And then I would probably go into a warm-up activity, especially with the younger students. And then I would do my presentation of the new material. I would practice that, whether that be in small groups or individually or even as a class. And then I would do some sort of activity that would assess the initial objectives to wrap up.
Great. Yeah, very logical flow. I like that. So we'll talk about this in a few minutes, but definitely outlines. I know I put you guys on the spot, so some of your ideas might not flow perfectly, but in time, you'll want to have really good flow between the different parts of your lesson plan to make sure you're spending enough time on everything and that students can keep up and that you're not missing anything. That's great. Yeah, I'm glad to see a lot of things that also Jamie put, like warm-ups, really crucial. Yeah, great. Okay, let's do one more. Quincy, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey.
Yeah, so for my five, I wrote room for questions and clarification, a goal for the lesson, steps to reach these goals, multiple methods of teaching, written, verbal, visual, etc., and then breaks. And it's generally some pretty vague kind of criterias, because I think vagueness can be important or can be very useful in a classroom. I think reading the room and like seeing what your students want, doing that a lot of times in the classroom is very important. And so I like to leave a lot of room for reflection on top of like warm-ups and presentations and conclusions. And I think breaks are really important. I know I like breaks, so I can only imagine my students liking them as well.
Good point. That's really good. I really like Quincy's response because it's very student-centered, right? So he's not just thinking, what is my lesson plan going to do for me, but also how does this work for the students? Are they going to respond to it well? So he's very sensitive to their needs. He's going to provide time for questions and clarification. Same things we've been hearing, like goals or aims or objectives, very good. And breaks, yeah. Even if it's not necessarily a break where students are leaving the room or you're leaving the room, some kind of downtime in between the lesson where they're doing some kind of reflective exercise that's quiet, or something that feels like a mental break. Yeah, that's awesome. Matt, are you there? Is there one thing you would add? Is there something you would add to a lesson plan that maybe you haven't heard yet?
Yes, I'm here, Sean. Let's take a moment. What are your essential components of a lesson plan?
Maybe just like one. What is there one you would want to add?
I would just add, always try to end on a high note. For example, you could have a typical lesson, maybe 40, 45 minutes. You could have a 25-minute, just everything is going wrong. Maybe your first 30 seconds, everything is wrong. It's just everything is off. But the last 10 minutes, you don't give up. You stick with your class. And your last 10 minutes is magical, right? Students are going to remember the last 10 minutes of your class the most. So I would always focus on just ending on a high note. The beginning of the lesson can be more of the drilling, or practicing the vocabulary, the target phrases. Make sure, check for comprehension, kind of get the dry stuff out of the way, and then save that last 10 to 15 minutes just to liven it up, bring it to life, and end it on a high note.
Yeah, that sounds great. That's a good point, that students tend to have young people tend to have a really short attention span. So they may or may not see you struggling in the beginning or the middle portion of your lesson, but if you can get through it and either modify it or switch to something else entirely, if you can make it something where they're participating and they're learning about something, even if it wasn't in your lesson plan, it's good to go out like that instead of just kind of throwing in the towel, like one of the examples I shared earlier. So let's look at maybe what a simple, no, don't do the timer again. Okay, here we go. So this is what maybe like a basic lesson plan might look like. So we've talked about, I think, most of these things, right? So if you want to put general information, the class kind of, if it's your first month or first week and you want to make sure you're going to the right classroom, it depends on the country, right? In some countries, it's the teachers that move around, and in some countries, it's the students. So if you want to put details at the top just to make sure you're in the right place at the right time, that first week or the first month, go for it. If it's complicated, definitely put that there. We've talked about, everybody mentioned something like objectives or goals. I'm not sure if somebody wrote something like materials or resources, but the texts themselves, we'll talk more about what a resource can mean. And the procedure, the activities, the steps, and assessment, right? Checking for learning, checking for comprehension in some form. So that's, like the lesson planning 101, but the more nuanced version is a little bit more detailed, and it's the one I want to focus on. So yeah, again, your aims, your goals, but they should relate to something, right? They shouldn't just be goals because you think they're relevant, right? They should relate to a curriculum or the textbook or what you've been going over lately with your LET or another teacher, right? A variety of activities, assessments, and rubrics. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about suitability and differentiation. And I think a few people mentioned timing, but yeah, how to space out your lesson. I think, some of us might be pretty ambitious and, overplan sometimes. So it's really good to know how long things last. And unfortunately, if you're teaching elementary school, things can move really quick. 2 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 30 seconds here. If you're doing maybe high school, things can be fleshed out a little more slowly sometimes, and it's a little bit more flexible. But with kids, you have to be 1 or 2 steps ahead of them, knowing what's next, right? What do I have enough time for the next thing, right? Sure, materials, make sure you prepare. the more you teach, you'll have moments where even though you thought you prepared, like you'll be at the printer like 30 minutes before class, but the printer won't be working or it's out of ink and you're just like wringing your hands. So always got to be prepared and expect something to go wrong. Just have backup plans or have another text with you. And I think we can get into this yet, but reflection. And by that, I mean your own reflection. We can do student reflection in terms of assessment, but it's also important for the teacher to take time to reflect passively or actively, right? Okay, so I don't think this is where my break is built into my PowerPoint, but we've been here for an hour, so I'm gonna hit the pause button right now. We'll come back in about 10 minutes and we'll keep going, okay? All right, folks. So I'm going to start up again because we are constrained with time, and a lot of you are on the East Coast, which is even later than where I am in California. But if you are interested in seeing some other ways lesson plans can take shape, there's a lot of other styles out there. Gagne has a 9-part lesson plan. Okay, Gagne, that's a lot. Hunter has 7, and there's also the 5E instructional model, among many others. So I didn't want to cover all of them because that would be a bit overwhelming, but maybe this will come up again at another workshop and we'll talk more about those, or there for you to pursue personally when you have a chance. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going along, and we're gonna talk about, so we're gonna go through the basic lesson plan and the important elements and talk about aims and goals and what makes good goals for a lesson plan, right? So for example, one teacher says, I want my students to be able to write better. Okay, and another teacher says, by having my students practice coordinating conjunctions, they will be better at writing longer, more complex sentences. Now, Celine, if you're there, which one do you think is a better and more realistic goal or achievable goal for a teacher?
The second one, it's more detailed and it's giving you exactly what the students or what they can do, what the teacher can do to achieve that goal.
Exactly, as simple as that, right? So it's answering a lot of how questions, right? So the teacher's thinking about not just the end result, but the process, right? So getting students to write better, no easy task, right? So you have to have a plan of how you're going to do that, how you're going to arrive at better writing, all right? So let's look at a way to think about goals. Right, so when you're making your own lesson plans, there's 3 pretty simple questions you can bear in mind, right? So the first one is really crucial, right? Is it clear? Not just in your mind, right? But it has to be clear to your audience, right? So sometimes things are really clear for us. And I think because we have a mental image of how we expect things to go, we just assume that translates over to the people in front of us. And sometimes we have to put a little more effort into making it intelligible, especially to younger people, right? Can it be measured? Is it measurable, quantifiable, qualifiable? And is it attainable, right? So getting back to suitability and appropriate level. So let's look at a few examples. Okay. This is one of my favorite games. If you haven't heard of Two Truths and a Lie, get on it, because this is a great game. It's a good icebreaker game. It's good for getting to know your students and for the students being able to get to know you. So really fun and a good one to use in the beginning of a school year, right? So students will play the speaking game Two Truths and a Lie to reinforce their knowledge of the simple past and present perfect tenses, right? So is it clear, right? Dana, are you there? I think I've looked at some of your homework, so it's good to see your face here. But what do you think about? Great. What do you think about this idea, this lesson from the teacher?
I love playing Two Truths and a Lie. I think it's a great way to get students to use vocabulary of their actual daily life, and then try to trick the other students so they get really excited about it.
Yeah, great. Okay. Yeah, so it's popular. It's also a good way to practice grammar. So in the case of this teacher, they want to use the game to practice the past tenses, right? So they want to make sure the students are comfortable using simple past and present perfect, which is not the easiest tense to teach, right? So is it clear? I would say pretty clear, as long as you explain the directions to the students if they don't know it. It's definitely measurable, right? Because the students are going to come up with 3 sentences, and if they're making mistakes, you'll be able to see them and assess, right? Is it attainable? Probably. It depends on the level of the students, but you can adjust that to their skill level. So you can give them very simple examples when you share your 2 truths and 1 lie. So yeah, great. Thank you, Dana. All right. Students will practice vocabulary about their homes. Georgia, what do you think about those 3 questions as it relates to that lesson plan?
It's not that specific. So not very clear, like what kind of vocab about homes. Is it going to be like vocab about things, your family life? Like it could be like house stuff. Is it measurable? I don't think so. Is it attainable? Probably not.
Yeah, right. So obviously we see when things are very detailed, it's probably going to be, that's not to say that something that's super detailed is going to be a better lesson plan, but comparing this one to the following one, it's just lacking, right? So this might be really appropriate. We just need more information, right? Maybe they're on a chapter in a textbook about home life, about, family, home life, kitchen, etc. Not very clear. We don't have anything to measure. Is it attainable? Probably, right? Most students, even young students, know a bit of vocabulary about things around the house, right? But it's lacking in the first 2 points for sure. Students will write 2 paragraphs on what they did over the summer vacation. Max, what do you think?
Well, I can see it being attainable, maybe kind of difficult to get there without any sort of game plan. Seems it's measure. I feel like it seems measurable. They just have to write 2 paragraphs. Maybe clear, but I don't know. It just doesn't seem like there's much of a game plan to get there overall. Yeah,
exactly, right? So when I see a lesson plan like this, there's no answer to the question why, right? There's how, there's a bit of how, there's some process, but they're not answering questions about why this is important. Okay, we can assume, maybe it's September, students are coming back from vacation, so it's relevant in that sense, but we don't know why exactly beyond that. Is there a certain tense we're looking for, or are they going to do some kind of presentation? Are they going to work in groups? Are they going to do something else, right? So yeah, very, very good analysis. Okay, let's keep going, moving along. Yeah, so the funnest part for me in making a lesson plan is planning the actual activities themselves. And depending on your co-teacher and your school, your school district, some of you might have more flexibility than others, but it's good to find out how much flexibility you have, because once you know, you can start to plan out other texts, things outside of the textbook, field trips, and things that are just a little bit more creative and a little bit more interesting or fun, typically, right? Right. So let's talk about some different activities. You could focus on kinesthetic learning, which you've probably come across if you've taken some courses in education before, or you've tried it yourself as a teacher. And this could work in a lot of different ways. For example, you could have learning stations, right? I have some pictures, right? So the bottom picture, you have 2 learning stations going on. This is a pretty ideal classroom that has technological capabilities. You can see one station has laptops going and headphones. That's great. And the students are working independently, and you can see a teacher or an assistant with another group, and they're kind of doing some discussion, right? Another one is a jigsaw, and I wanted to share a video on that, but I'm not sure if we'll have enough time. By a show of comments, how many people are familiar with the jigsaw method? You can put it into the chat. You can just say yes or no, but I'm curious, as a kind of survey, have you tried the jigsaw method before, or you've never heard of it? That's fine too. Cool. This is exciting then. Right. Okay. One person said yes so far. So in that case, maybe we will watch part of the video, but this is a favorite and it's really good, especially with younger learners. And you can think of a jigsaw like the way this puzzle looks. You have 4 different types within one group, and you have these people moving around the room. So they'll spend a few minutes with one group, and then one person gets up and moves to the next group. So you constantly have a new group, but with different roles. So if a red person leaves one group, a new red person comes, right? And so I think we'll watch a video on that, but you can see another photo, and we call that a gallery walk. Yeah, it comes from museums where you walk around and look at things on the wall. So we have maybe a high school class here where you have some posters up. In fact, this is actually a little overwhelming. There's a lot of posters on the wall, and they're all in one place. Usually they're spread out around the entire room, but you have some posters there, and you have students walking around commenting on the work of other students, either with sticky notes or writing onto the poster directly. And I mean, I'm biased, I like museums, so I kind of like this workshop, but it's really good for getting students to move around, seeing other people's work, being productive, and giving some constructive feedback to their peers. So even if you haven't heard of this one's probably a little bit more logical, but I think we are gonna watch this quick video on the jigsaw method, just so everybody's like, oh, this is how it is, this is how it works.
Hey there, this is Jennifer Gonzalez for Cult of Pedagogy. In this video, I will be showing you how to use the jigsaw method. First, I'll show you the basic structure of the jigsaw, then a variation known as Jigsaw 2, and finally, I'll give you some tips for troubleshooting this strategy. So what is the jigsaw method? Developed by Elliot Aronson in 1971, Jigsaw is a cooperative learning strategy where each student in a group takes responsibility for one chunk of the content, then teaches it to the other group members. Like the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, students fit their individual chunks together to form a complete body of knowledge. Here are the steps of a basic jigsaw, sometimes referred to as Jigsaw 1. Step 1 is to divide students into groups of 4 to 6 people per group. Jigsaw works best when you have the same number of students in each team, so avoid having some groups of 4, some of 5, and some of 6. Later in this video, I'll show you what to do if you can't divide students into perfectly even teams. For this example, we'll assume you're working with a class of exactly 30 students who can be divided evenly into groups of 6. We'll call these jigsaw groups. Step 2, divide your content into 4 to 6 chunks. It's important to divide the content into the same number of chunks as the number of students in each group. So if you have 6 students per group, break your content into 6 chunks. If you're only going to have 5 students in each group, then you'll only need 5 chunks. Suppose you're a history teacher and you're doing an overview of different types of government. You could divide your content into these chunks: democracy, dictatorship, monarchy, republic, totalitarianism, and theocracy. By the way, these index cards just represent chunks of content. You don't need to use actual index cards to do Jigsaw. A chunk of content can be a section of a textbook chapter, a handout containing information, or an online resource. Step 3, assign one chunk of content to each person in the Jigsaw group. Each group has one person responsible for one chunk of the content. That person will be expected to teach that chunk to the rest of the group. At this point, students don't really interact with other members of their group. They just read and study their own chunk of content independently. Then their independent study is fortified by the next step. Step 4, have students meet in expert groups. After each student has studied his or her chunk independently, they gather with all the other students who have been assigned to the same chunk. These are called expert groups. Within each expert group, students compare their ideas and work together to prepare some kind of presentation to give to their Jigsaw group. During this time, gaps in individual students' knowledge can be filled, misconceptions can be cleared up, and important concepts can be reinforced. Step 5, students return to Jigsaw groups. Now that students have studied their chunks in their expert groups, they return to their original Jigsaw groups, where each student takes a turn presenting their chunk of information. Meanwhile, the other students listen carefully, take notes, and ask lots of questions. Once the first expert has gone, the others take their turns. As each expert teaches their chunk of content, the others in the group are learning it. Step 6, assess all students on all the content. The assessment can be a simple quiz to make sure all students got a basic understanding of all the material.
Be sure to include all content chunks in this quiz. Jigsaw 2 is a variation on the basic
Okay, so some feedback in the beginning. I don't want to get in Jigsaw 2 because it's a little bit of a riff on the original one. We can look at that another time, or you can follow up on the video. But that's basically how Jigsaw works. It's really good for kind of teaching responsibility, right? So students are responsible to themselves, to their original group, and to the groups that they interact with. And it's really important in the end that she leaves time for assessment to make sure everybody's participated, everybody understands, and so on. So yeah. Okay, yeah, you probably remember doing this as a kid if you had a good teacher. Yeah, great point. Okay, so I'm glad we spent a couple minutes on that. We can do this, perhaps in a later workshop, talk about teaching strategies. But I just wanted to show a possible idea for a lesson plan. Okay. Right, so beyond using kind of physical or kinesthetic learning, you could focus on a student's ability to learn through music or through listening, right? So we have some kids playing music. Again, they're moving, but they're also processing language through, singing or listening to music or performing. So you will have students that like this. You'll have students that are really shy and don't like this. But kids tend to enjoy this because they aren't too self-aware, and they have no problem getting into some music and looking a little silly. You could also focus on visual or spatial skills. So a good one for somebody who's teaching English and has a lesson or a chapter on directions or getting around town. You could hand out physical maps. You could put a map on the projector, on the board, or you could even make a kind of grid into your classroom. And you can really get creative. If you trust your students and the LET lets you, which I'm not sure they will, you could even, back in the day, I must have had some lessons where I blindfolded kids, and the one kid is giving directions to the other, and they're trying not to knock into a chair or a stuffed animal you put on the ground. So you can really get into it depending on the maturity of your students and how much you trust them and yourself. But there's a lot of ways to do something visual or spatial. Right? We should always think about verbal skills, right? A lot of you will be teaching conversational English as well. So you could have them do a presentation, whether something that's planned or something more impromptu. See, this is with the original marker for the break. We're already done with that. So moving on, we talked about activities, and we're getting towards the end, but another big one is assessment. And this is a word that's come to mean a lot more things, because when I was a kid, it was pretty much just testing. They really tested the heck out of you. And they even did a lot of standardized testing, which didn't really help the students. I think it was a way for the school district or the state to assess school districts and decide who gets money, which is kind of crummy, actually. But nowadays, thank God, there's a lot more flexibility in terms of how to assess, right? So we can do things like flip the classroom. Some of you might have heard of that, where you switch out things that are usually done at home for things that are done in the classroom and vice versa. We talk about differentiated learning or instruction, and employing students' multiple intelligences. So getting them to show their different strengths in learning, not just tests or quizzes, but a lot of other things. So I made a list, and I'm curious if you've heard of these, if you've used these before, if you remember them from when you were a student. Some of these are pretty old school. So for example, verbal comprehension questions, just asking students at the end of a lesson, kind of informally, some questions about the material. Pop quiz, another classic one, but one that is not usually well loved by students for obvious reasons. And yeah, Open book exams, take-home exams. I think when I was a student, I kind of thought, like, what is the teacher doing when they would give us an open book exam or a take-home exam? But now that I've been teaching for a while, I can see the reasons for doing that. One that's really great is student portfolios, and that's really good because it promotes independent learning. And for example, if a student doesn't do well on one test or one essay or one project, it doesn't end up hurting their entire grade for a course because they have a portfolio where maybe they keep their 3 or their 5 best projects or outputs from the whole semester. So I really like that one. I think it's really mature and it gives a lot of trust to the students. So that's something really to think about, you know, if you want to kind of have student portfolios instead of just test, quiz. Podcasting, that's for older students, you know, at least high school, some kind of recording, presentations, visual organizers, idea mapping, or audio or video recordings. There's some classroom management websites or tools. I'm blanking on the one I've used before, but where students can record videos and send them to you and where they can watch each other's videos. And also PBL. Anybody heard of PBL before? Besides Celine or Matt? George is saying no. Evan? Wild guess. Peanut butter and no. Nice, Angel. Yeah, problem-based learning. That's really, yeah, that's probably a phrase that exists. I'm thinking, you know, for people that do like environmental engineering or something, that's really advanced. That's a good idea. For us, it's project-based learning. So projects, but typically really involved projects that last at least a few weeks or a month or two, or even the whole semester. Maybe not every day, but something that they're working on for a long period of time. Yeah, working on their team building skills and things like that. Is there anything that sounds exciting to you or something that you think, actually, I would never do that? This would not, I don't know why this is in this list. Is there anything that stands out to you or looks exciting or looks something like something you would not try? What are exit slips? Okay, Jamie, just a second. Is everybody pretty familiar with exit slips? Yes? Yeah, right. So this can have a lot of different forms, but it's basically a get out of class at the end of class pass, right? So it could be a quiz or, you know, they have to stand up and say something. It can be a variety of things, but it's really good to have them know, hey, you can't just leave. You have to actually have some kind of, you have to show something, right? Does anyone have any other question about what something means or how you would implement that? I think a lot of them are pretty common sense, like comprehension questions. Most people are fans of Kahoot. I was seeing some comments, I think. Yeah. Students like it, teachers like it. And maybe we'll have a workshop someday about games. I think we're going to do gamification, but also about best games and best practices for games. Okay. So we're winding down. I want to leave some time at the end for questions because I know Celine and Matt want to get involved. But a couple other things before we wrap up. I'm not going to spend much time on it, but rubrics are really important. You don't need them for every assignment, but they're really good, especially for things like writing assignments and presentations, as well as group work, right? So they're important for the students to know how they're going to be graded. It's not just for you when you have their essays and you're at home and you're about to grade a stack, right? So it's also important for students to see that well in advance to know what's expected of them, because it's really unfair. And if you've ever been a student that didn't get clear instructions or a clear rubric on how you were going to be graded, and then you were graded in a way that you thought was kind of unfair or was unforeseen, you know the feeling, right? So whether it's a simple rubric or something more complicated, it's good to share it with students and for them to know what's expected and how they're going to be graded. Again, it could be really simple. It could be even something like where you're just checking boxes, or it could be more nuanced. So the one on the right is more about writing, and it basically explains what you're looking for each section, right? That's a little bit more detailed, right? Suitability and being appropriate with your lesson plans. Like I said, a lot of us are really idealistic, and we want to have a really detailed lesson plan, the best lesson plan. But sometimes things can be a little bit unrealistic, and we always have to remember our students. So that's why I like one of the comments that one of the ETAs made about an hour ago about being sensitive to the needs of students and being aware of when they need breaks, when they need to ask questions. So a big part of that is making sure your material and your activities are suitable, right? Okay, so really quickly, let's match a lesson plan with an appropriate audience. So on the left, we have 3 simple lesson plans, and on the right, we have a level. So let's take about 30 seconds. You can match it up. Okay, so that was pretty short, guys. Peony, what do you think? And I can see actually there being maybe 2 possible ways to go about this, but how did you match up 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so for number 1, I instantly put that for upper high school because I think breaking down the movie Crazy Rich Asians, there's a lot of layers to that. And with all the different layers, there's probably a lot of complex vocabulary to discuss. And number 2, I matched Halloween activities with middle school because I imagine that some Halloween activities actually could be more complex, or that's why I kind of went back and forth between 2 and 3 for the middle school. But Halloween activities, I would do a more complex lesson plan for that one, like corn maze or something like that, right? And then 3, English around the kitchen, I figured those are really basic vocabulary words that maybe lower elementary school kids might be able to grasp better.
Yeah, I could see it going that way, right? So you had it C, A, and B.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think with 2 and 3, it's a little bit flexible. Is there anybody that did CBA? Is there anybody that has a different idea about why 2 and 3 should be switched?
I had it switched. This is Avery here.
Hey, Avery.
I had it switched just because I thought Halloween might be more exciting to elementary students versus kitchen items. I think that definitely that's probably something they would have more know about. But overall, black cat or cats or spiders might be something more sellable or more interesting to younger students, perhaps.
Yeah, that's another. So it really depends on your students. You're gonna know them better. In my case, I put 2 as B as well and 3 as A, just because I was thinking Halloween is very exciting for little kids, especially the whole costume aspect and candy. And I was thinking little kids, although they like to eat, they're probably not in the kitchen too much thinking about, what is that? What is this? So yeah, it could go either way. But yeah, definitely the first one. Representation, roles, a pretty nuanced movie, definitely for older teens. So great. So in terms of suitability, there's a few things to consider beyond that, right? So socioeconomic level, you might have students that are of a similar socioeconomic level, or it might be very diverse. You might feel like you're in a different socioeconomic level than them. So it requires certain sensitivities. Of course, skill level, we've been talking about that the past hour and a half, right? Considering the skills and the level of your students. cultural considerations and sensitivities, religious considerations, educational style. In some countries, there's a lot of drilling, right? We've talked about that this week. And in some contexts, we try to avoid that, right? So maturity level as well. Sometimes you might want your students to be more mature than they actually are, especially the boys, unfortunately. That's sometimes how it goes. But you just have to be ahead of them a little bit and to think, okay, I don't think this is going to work for some of our students, right? Yeah, so these are just some things to consider when you interact with the students, right? So I think this is one of the last sections, but timing, very obvious, right? It's the way you manage the flow of time in your classroom. For example, giving about 15 minutes to middle schoolers to write a paragraph sounds pretty reasonable, but I suppose that was a typo. 1 hour is not, right? Some of your ideas about time will be intuitive, right? You can kind of sense when students need a break or when something's not really going right and you need to pivot. So some of that you'll feel. Some of it you might not feel because it's cultural, right? When you're doing something that they think is a little bit strange culturally, you're not going to know it, at least in the beginning. So there's cues you have to pay attention to and behaviors that will hopefully help guide you if you're keyed into them, right? You want to think about sequencing, spacing, how you spread out the time on different activities, and if there's enough time for everything in your lesson plan. And yeah, let's look at ordering of a lesson plan, right? So I put an example on the next page, but it's slightly out of order. So I think we're going to spend a couple minutes trying to fix it. Right, so the warm-up is there. That's in correct position. Students draw a picture of something they did over the summer. Again, so beginning of the school year activity. How would we rearrange A, B, C, and D? Let's take 60 seconds. All right. So Jamie, can you give us the correct order for in your case? How did you arrange these?
Yeah, so I did C, D, A, and B.
Okay. So the warm-up is students draw a picture of something they did over the summer. Okay. And then you're saying C, teacher shows her own picture. So she's modeling the activity, describes what she did, and focuses on simple past tense. So maybe she's enunciating this a little more clearly or loudly. Good. Students brainstorm. They think about what they did. Then they write a paragraph. Okay. Students work in groups. So they're kind of helping each other. They're editing, circling verbs to make sure they're correct. And then they do a rewrite. Anybody have an alternative approach, or most people, is it C, D, A, B for you? Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, so again, simple lesson plan, but the most important thing beyond the content itself is the ordering, the sequencing. Right, so really quickly, materials, resources. You might not think of the classroom as a resource, but it is, right? So if you look at the classroom top left, very organized, typical traditional kind of class. Everybody has their own space. It's lined up so the teacher can move around. And then you have a more kind of modern seminar style classroom where still everybody is kind of facing the front, facing the teacher, or at least in that direction. But they're sharing a table. So this one is a little more seminar style, more group oriented. And there are advantages and disadvantages to both. Your classrooms, I can't tell you exactly how they're going to be structured. I'm guessing it's going to be more typical to the one on the left. But that's kind of the exciting thing when you get to your school and when you see the classrooms, you can start to think about how you can move the students around. If you can, how you're going to move around the classroom when you're observing them, when you're assessing them, and different activities you can do based on the position of the desks and the size you have. Hopefully you're in a fairly good sized classroom. Another resource would be something like a smart board. I've still been in classrooms recently with chalkboards. I hate chalk. Dries out my fingers. Don't love it. I don't love the sounds. I wish we could be a post-chalk society, but you might have chalk in your classroom. You might have a smart board, or you might have some kind of combination of things. So you might have a whiteboard as well. So you want to be aware of how these things work. The students might know some tricks about the smart board that you don't know yet. That's okay, but you want to be able to use it to its full potential. And in the middle, you have colleagues, right? That's probably one of your most important resources, especially in the beginning, because they've been there longer, they know the culture better, and they know the students probably a bit better as well. So you have to think of them as a resource, something that can help you. Okay, classroom here. And it probably gives some of you anxiety to see a classroom like this. I was in the Philippines for 2 years doing some teaching and teacher training. And this is pretty typical. You probably have about 40 or 50 students. So in this case, how do you do kinesthetic learning, right? You have to be very careful and you're probably quite limited. But at the same time, you can see that you have a pretty dense classroom, but everybody is involved. Even the students in the back are paying attention, and they're all kind of enjoying it, except for one girl at least. But so yeah, I'm not really sure how it's going to look, but you can think about the spacing of your students and the actual physical things like desks as something that can help you kind of move the class around, have them work on different activities, and get them moving as they're learning. Right, so we talked about this smart board, know how to use it. Your colleagues are perhaps your best resource. And if you would like to find out more about teaching standards, I'm sure you're going to get them from your school or your LET or another colleague. But if you're just curious about other pre-K standards, pre-K to the grade 12 standards, you could search on TESOL's English language proficiency standards, right? Hopefully you can use supplementary materials besides your textbooks, videos, clips from movies, articles, photos. Photos are really good visual aids, other textbooks, a chapter here and there. Right, the last one, we talked about this at the beginning, but reflecting on your lesson plans themselves, right? So this might not seem super attractive because it requires you to kind of slow down and think about things, and you might feel like you don't have that much extra time, especially in the classroom. But maybe on Sunday night or when you're making your lesson plans or grading, you can take time to think about how your lesson plan went, right? So again, this is getting back to helping yourself, intrinsic motivation, right? Things won't always go to plan. You have to have a backup plan or two, and hopefully be able to improvise as well. If you get to be really good at improvising, your students won't even know when the lesson plan's going wrong. They'll just think it's part of the lesson plan, right? Yeah, so we're winding down. We don't have time for this. No. Sorry. Right, so we're at the end. I'm wondering, without looking back, if people can remember the 6 parts of a nuanced lesson plan. So the word bank is at the bottom. Reflection, timing, aims, differentiation, rubrics, suitability, sequencing, activities, assessments, and materials. So I'll go first. State your aims as they relate to the curriculum. Celine, do you remember B? What are the 3 answers for sentence B?
I want to say consider a variety of activities, assessments, material.
Sounds good. All words
No?
that end with S. Yeah, I like that. No, yeah, that sounds good. Jamie, C, plan for blank and blank.
I'm thinking plan for suitability and sequencing.
Okay, suitability sounds pretty good. Anybody have a change or an addition?
Change to timing.
Suitability and timing? Or timing and sequencing?
Suitability and timing.
Everybody agree? Okay, we're gonna leave a question mark on C. C is the most difficult one. We'll come back to C. Be mindful of, okay, this will help us maybe. D, be mindful of this and that. Avery, do you remember what we have to be mindful about?
I know one is sequencing and then the other must be timing then.
Okay, I like it. Logical, right? Okay, so we have D as be mindful of sequencing and timing. Okay. E, prepare your, Evan, prepare your
rubrics.
Okay, sounds good. And F, allow time for anybody?
Reflection.
Good, we just did it. Thank you. Yeah, allow time for reflection, right? So what was C? Suitability and differentiation. I think we had suitability, right? But we didn't have differentiation. Yeah. Okay. So we don't have time to do little mock lesson plans. Unfortunately, that's okay. We covered a lot. So I'm wondering if anybody, most people I think said they don't have too much experience with taking on lesson planning directly like this. So I'm wondering, did you learn some strategies or did it help you with structure? Do you have any questions? Or, we talked about kinesthetic learning and how to try to move students around in the classroom, especially considering if there are desks or what kind of desks and that sort of thing. So does anybody want to ask any questions? Of course, we can invite in Matt and Celine because I'm sure they have ideas about lesson planning that I would be interested to hear.
Can I chime in on something? Very small, very quick. And this is more coming from the top-down approach to your lesson planning, because you have to be aware of how many lessons you have to cover if there's a textbook. So make sure you plan that. I'm a top-down kind of person. So like I start at the top and, look at the big picture and then, go down into the nitty-gritty. So, make sure you have like a schedule of the school, how many classes, how many times you will be seeing your students, so that you can match that up to your textbook, and see if you have wiggle room, or if you don't. If you have some wiggle room, then you can do, extra lessons on, holidays. The fall semester, usually there's a lot of, Halloween and Thanksgiving, blah, blah, blah. But if you don't have wiggle room, then, maybe you have to bring 2 lessons together into one. It depends on your situation. Make sure you talk to your co-teacher and discuss your schedule, the school schedule, the calendar, and be prepared. You know, every once in a while there'd be like impromptu days off for whatever reason. So you may not see your students, so then you might be behind. So I just wanted to put it out there because I know I made that mistake my first year in Korea and had to play catch up.
Yeah, so that's great. Thanks, Aline. Some people like to go top down, but you know, some people might want to start from the end and move their way back to the front, right? So you might get some directions, like you have to assess them on a certain way or on a certain topic. So you're going to start kind of in the middle, like, oh, I have to do this kind of assessment. Then you're going to go back to the step before. Okay, well, what kind of activities am I going to do? What are the goals? And then kind of, starting with the basics. So you can move up and down in the lesson plan. There's no one right way. Some people just always like to start at the top, but you can move in different directions. You can skip back and forth and change things, edit things, but it's up to you. There's no big gonna be like, you know, oh, I don't like the way you started your lesson plan, and you know, it's really up to you.
Right. And also be aware if this is the situation for your school. Sean, you discussed assessment, but there might also be standardized testing going on in the school. So if there is, make sure you're aware so that you cover that material.
Yeah, right. I think I can remember like when I was in high school and we had standardized tests and I was like, hey, never heard of that. That's not fair. Yeah. Anybody else? Is there something that stood out to you? Something that looks like you're ready to try or you have questions about how to implement it?
Hi, this is Avery. You mentioned one thing earlier about working with, so I'll be in an elementary school, and you mentioned one thing of how younger students might move through things more quickly, or like you won't have a lot of opportunities like, oh, write this paragraph for 15 minutes. Like it's mostly pretty immediate, like lots of, I guess, different activities happening. I was just wondering how do you know how much to plan, or if you plan not enough? I guess you always have to have a backup. What if your backup is like done within 30 minutes and I don't know. I guess you learn with your co-teacher and experience, but I just remembered that and got nervous.
Yeah, I'll just make a real quick comment before we ask Matt his opinion, but I wouldn't necessarily say that younger students move quickly, because actually learning can be like a pretty slow process, just a little bit here and there, you know, a little bit every day. The thing about the quickly is that, you know, the spacing can be really quick. So you might not spend too much time on any one thing, but that's not really about how they learn. That's more about their attention span.
Great clarification. No, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I had a question about the Google Classroom assignments, actually. When it talks about Taiwanese English textbooks or the Taiwanese English textbook, I was wondering if that would be something that we should ask our LET for, or something we should look for online. I was having trouble finding them online, but I wasn't sure where you wanted us to go for that.
Perfect question, and Matt's going to be able to answer this better. Great, Katie. But yeah, Matt, what can you tell us about their primary textbooks, and then how should they think about supplementary materials?
Yeah, so I saw a lot of people asking about the textbooks, so I just put a link into the Google Classroom. So under the assignment page, you should see a Google Doc link. And that is a popular, I don't have all the textbooks there, but there's Dino on the Go for elementary school. But there are other textbooks used in Taiwan. There's probably like 3 big ones. But the Dino on the Go will give you just a general idea. The vocabulary and the topics are going to be pretty similar, whatever textbook you're using, but they might have a different ordering. But yeah, you can find a couple examples now using that link. If it doesn't work, let me know. But yeah, I'd also reach out, or maybe your coordinators can help you to find exactly what textbooks your school or LET are using. And I think we can find digital copies. I think we have them somewhere. If not, I would suggest that while you're in quarantine, that somebody drop off the textbook so you can spend the 2 weeks of quarantine at least with the physical copy, just to scan through your textbooks that way. But let me know if that Google Doc doesn't work in the Google Classroom. And then to quickly touch on Avery's question with timing, I'd recommend always having like just the warm-up activities, up your sleeves. So if you have 10 minutes at the end of class, you have 5 go-to warm-up. Okay, I'm going to do this warm-up. We haven't done that in a while. And I think next week we'll have some game and activity workshops, so we can go over like, some go-to warm-ups that you can do in the beginning or the end of the class. And again, when you end the class on the high note, now you have the students excited to come back to your next classroom. And then also there is this completionist mindset with our Taiwanese workbooks. Mostly the pressure is coming from parents, not the school administration, from my experience. So the parents want to see every exercise in the workbook completed. So what you'll see is that if a lesson ends 5 minutes early, you'll see the LET, okay, everybody take out your workbook, do exercise 1 or exercise 3. So you have some writing task at the end of the lesson, because it's 2 birds, 1 stone. The parents really want to see it. You have 5 minutes, you don't know what to do. So you'll always have that as a backup to your backup. Just take out your workbook and complete exercise 1. And it's homework anyway, so everybody can be happy in the end.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it sounds like they're gonna have plenty of material. They're not gonna be on the internet the night before looking for activities, right, Matt?
What's that?
I was saying that it sounds like they're going to have plenty of material, whether it's from the textbook or from supplementary stuff or from other things the LET has. They're not going to be on the internet coming up with their own material.
Yeah, it's up to them. So the internet is a great resource, though. But one other thing, like with the textbooks, like don't get frustrated at first if you find your LET is too textbook centric, because as Celine mentioned, there's going to be periods, breaks in the schedule after midterm exams, after final exams, where you just have this free time, where you have a lot more freedom of choice with what topics you want to cover. So you'll probably find the 2 weeks before midterm, it's going to be textbook. But then 2 weeks after the midterm happens, the LET might turn to you like, hey, the next 2 weeks are all yours. What do you want to cover? So it's going to be this give and take. So you have to, the LETs face the pressure from the school administration and the parents if objectives aren't measured. So, we have to be mindful, defer to them with the pacing of the curriculum in the semester. But they're also going to be mindful that you're going to want to do your own thing. Like, hey, I'm really passionate about, ocean preservation. Can we do a lesson on that? And there will be time in the schedule. So when I was at ETA, the last 2 or 3 weeks, we finished the final exam 3 weeks early. And it was just free topics after that. So there will be, don't get frustrated at first. You're going to walk into the middle of a semester. But just be mindful of that.
Thanks, Matt. That was very helpful. Does anybody else have one more question or comment? We're going to wrap up, but we have time for one more. Okay. So, yeah, we are at the end of our workshops for this week. I thought they were all really different, but also really interesting and helpful. So I know Matt and Celine also appreciate the amount of effort that was put in this week. We weren't sure what to expect. We weren't sure exactly how many ETAs would be available. And it's good that we can meet up. It's unfortunate we can't see each other face to face, but by now we are really pandemic pros, and we are hopefully turning a new page, and we'll all be together in some sense next month. Yeah, next month in October. So Celine or Matt, do you have anything to add? You want to say thanks in some way, or your thoughts on the participation this week?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This week definitely was a little bit of a roller coaster. It's not done yet, but thank you for being here for our workshop. And yeah, looking forward to being together in Taiwan too.
Matt, any emotional cheerleading?
So, Sean, you know I'm not the best at emotional cheerleading. But yeah, we know the orientation. It's been a lot of, tasks to complete, and we do appreciate your patience and your efforts. And I know a lot of this is just, kind of, what's the right way to say, like, because you're not here, it doesn't feel real yet, I'm sure. But it's going to feel real very, very soon. And so, get excited and be ready, because it's going to happen fast, like too fast in a way. But we are here to support you. I know how difficult it can be and intimidating. Like, I was so terrified to do my first lesson. But I can just tell you, collaborate with your ETAs, collaborate with your LATs, collaborate with us, and it's going to be an awesome year for everybody. And I would like to thank Sean and Celine for being great teammates, and Kenny for being a great MC.
Thank you guys. It's helped me get the teacher gears turning in my head. So appreciate it.
Sean, I think you're muted.
Thank you. See, Kenny's there for that kind of thing. Yeah, so what was I going to say? I totally forgot. Yeah. Everybody, thanks for staying up late. I'm hangry. I didn't have dinner yet, but we'll be together soon, and let's be positive, and let's get our paperwork in and put pressure on the TICO office. Call them every day, send them threatening letters. Just kidding, don't do that. But everybody's working together. It seems like it's coming together pretty soon, and before you know it, you'll be in your quarantine hotel, like, oh, I miss when we were just doing those workshops and I had all that freedom in Chicago or wherever you are, right? So thanks again, and I believe we'll see you next week. Until then, we will see you in the Google Classroom, and we'll be giving you feedback there. Thank you.